Welcome back to part 2 of the matrix representational grid. We're up to the practical usage of the matrix representational grid. So we got up to this slide where if I use my cursor, you can sort of see this circle here. That's where you record who was in the group, who was absent, what session number you have. Here we've got 2 because we wanted to basically sort of compare 1 month to the next and whether the group is growing. But what you can see here hopefully is that there's a little circle and a B. So female named B was not present for this group. So what we're going to start to look at is how this grid offers the possibility to evaluate change that is taking place via the unconscious process that is inside the group matrix. So you can see the 2 separate time frames, and we're going to sort of go through what's been activated. And then you've got this octagon sort of figure, which is the actual matrix in operation. So let's look at the next slide where you can pick a segment out of your group session, or you can pick the whole group session with your theme. And in this case, on this grid, up the top here, what you should be able to see is 2 themes. So we've got the October session, the November session. So what you've got here as group theme is fear of condemnation, excuse the spelling error, and punishment when being open with parents. And that was there for both sessions. So the group theme or the group focal conflict theme is interpreted and formulated obviously by the group therapist. So then we have 2 points in time. We've got the dotted line, which is the earlier group, and we've got the solid line, which is a week later. So with this grid, you pick 1 relevant station on those 8 determinants we talked about to describe the interaction and dialogue for each determinant. So what's selected here, for example, in week 1, you've got the authority pattern lay at number 4. I'm not sure if you can see it. Authority patterns over here, and it was pretty close to the inner circle, number 4. While a week later, with the dotted line, it had moved to laissez-faire, which is here. So that is better. That's sort of progress on some level. So then the stations, once you've mapped the station on each of the 8 determinants, you then draw your octagon sort of figure or circle. You link them and it becomes this octagonal graphic figure, which represents the actual matrix in operation. So it brings it visually. So then when later on in the group process, the same theme is activated again, you can do the comparison between the matrix representational figure of that time and the previous one or ones, and it presumably shows the change process in the group matrix. So this then offers the possibilities to evaluate the change that is taking place unconsciously, but you can see it, and that's what's so nice about it. So you can see that this dotted line is a little bit more of a circle than a solid line. So you're going to say, well, what does a good group look like? That obviously we know that it's idealized. This is the idealized good analytic group. So when the group is operating like this, they produce a creative group climate. It's ripe with constructive, gains of insight and working through and change. So the good group is represented, I've sort of highlighted it in yellow. It's represented by balanced stations. So station number 3 for most determinants. So it promotes insight, like I said, therapeutic change and working through. But most of the time, you're obviously not going to have the perfect group. So what does a good enough group look like? So here I've sort of tried to map it. If you're in this blue area, you can be proud of yourself. So more realistically, through a good enough group, in a productive analytic group state of mind, it will be more like the blue area, somewhere in that shaded blue area. Any extremes in one or more determinants may signify a state of arrest or regression in the group as a whole. So any move from extreme stations towards the middle ones will signify a more mature group, a working or work group as per Bion. And Bion had this, so you have to know a little bit of psychoanalytic theory here. Bion's healthy group was called Bion's work group mentality. So there are these things called the Bion basic assumption states, which I will cover in a minute. But when Bion talks about the alternative to the basic assumption states, he talks about the work group mentality. So here the members are staying focused on the group task. They tolerate uncertainty and frustration. They engage in reflective thinking rather than reacting emotionally. So I just thought I'd throw that in. So the extremes in the grid, station 1 or 5, right in the middle or right on the outside, can indicate to you regression, dysfunctional group dynamics, and you're always looking for movement towards the middle stations, which signifies more maturity. So I've just mentioned Wilfred Bion. He was a British psychoanalyst, and he identified 3 basic assumption group states, which describe unconscious dynamics that can take over a group, often hindering its ability to function effectively. And these states emerge when a group is unable to engage in productive work and instead falls into primitive, emotionally driven patterns. Now, this bit is for probably the more experienced group analysts now, and I apologize if you haven't heard about these, but I just thought I'd throw it in. So Bion talked about these 3 basic assumptions, and he had little symbols for it. There's the dependency, the fight, flight, and the pairing, and he had little codes for them. So first I've graphed the dependency, which is the group unconsciously believes that one leader or authority figure, often the therapist, possesses all the knowledge and will take care of them. And the members become really passive, helpless, and overly reliant on the leader, expecting guidance and solutions. So if then the leader fails to meet these expectations, which of course they will, the group may become disillusioned or hostile. So an example of this would be a therapy group looks to the facilitator for all the answers and refuses to engage in self-reflection, believing only the therapist, the facilitator, has the power to help them. So let's move to the next slide. And that is Beyond's basic assumption of number 2, the fight, flight, BAF. I've again graphed it. This time it's the yellow, which is hard to see, but it's a solid line. The solid line. Can you see how it's not much of a circle at all? So here the group acts as if there's a threat, either external, an outsider, or internal, a group member or the therapist. And the members might become aggressive, fight, or avoidant, flight, rather than engaging in meaningful discussion. So here you get sort of conflict, scapegoating, or even disengagement from the group process. An example for this is, say, a team in a workplace meeting avoids discussing an issue, the copies outside, which is flight, or attacks a single member for being the problem, which is fight, rather than addressing the real concern, which is, it's a distraction from the work that really needs to be done. So then the last one, pairing, I've now tried to highlight it in this green. So Beyond's basic assumption called pairing, BAP. So here the group unconsciously believes that two members or a subgroup will save them by forming a special connection or alliance or romantic connection or parental-like bond. And so the group becomes more passive, waiting for this pair to produce a solution, symbolically seen as producing the Messiah or a new idea. And this can then lead to exclusion of other members or really unrealistic expectations. So, for example, in group therapy, you might have two members that are dominating discussions with their mutual support, while the rest of the group sort of disengages, drifts off, but somehow really expecting them to find the answers. So in therapy or in organizations, recognizing and addressing these basic assumption states helps your group return to effective functioning, to being a working group. So you don't want them to be in Beyond's basic assumption states. It's a defense. You want them to be in the working group state. But the grid will show you where your group is, and that's why I like it so much. So, basically, for the matrix representational grid, obviously you have to have a go at it yourself, but it can really be used to analyze your therapeutic group process. You can monitor group development over time. And I feel it can really support our trainees or supervision groups or supervision group therapists. Because often we have the issue of people need to write that last sort of paper to qualify, and they're often very lost of how to analyze a year or two of groups. And I just thought if I could offer this grid as a way to organize material and to get your head around things, then it might help people actually get there. I also feel that with my teaching at uni, research always has to be done. And if people actually wanted to research proper group therapy, unstructured group analytic groups, years away. So I just didn't want this grid to get forgotten because it's 40 years old now and I haven't heard much about it. So that's why I wanted to talk about it today. So in summary, the matrix representational grid gives us a visual and structured method to study group dynamics. It helps us identify therapeutic factors and group processes. It encourages a deeper understanding of the unconscious group as a whole process, the group matrix. And I think it can also show you when your group is stuck. And it is a research tool focusing solely on the group as a whole, or groupal level of abstraction, and it measures the unconscious group matrix. So this is my second last slide. So ever since psychotherapists began treating patients in groups, they've had to face the issue of understanding the dynamic forces that are set in motion, as well as the more challenging problem of how to use these forces to therapeutic advantage. The controversy in the field has not been whether group dynamics exist in therapy groups, but rather to what extent can they be exploited therapeutically for the good rather than destructively. So, aka Göran AHLIN, the matrix representational grid expresses the ever fascinating and ever complicated search for a better understanding of what is beyond the apparent surface of a good, healthy, and growth-promoting group as opposed to a bad and destructive one. And I'm going to go a bit wider now with another quote from him, which in turn is a matter of primary importance. So this destructive stuff, it's a matter of primary importance, not only to the group analysts and institutional staff in general, but to administrators, politicians, societal group networks, and nations as well. And even if in our own time, I mean, it's happening now, it's literally about the survival of mankind and the earth itself in relation to climate change, to Donald Trump politics, that sort of far-right fascism that shuts down dialogue and thinking and scapegoats certain groups within our lands is very, very worrying to all group analysts. Thank you. And I think we've got some time for questions.